Most adventure games have only one way you complete them. But players always approach them in different ways. Today on the first Quest, we're discussing how do you play adventure games? Hello, that's right. You're listening to Quest, the adventure game podcast. My name is Ben. I am one of the hosts of this podcast, and I am joined, as always, by...
Oh, me. It's me, Jess.
This is the first one, and I've done many podcasts.
Yeah, I'm used to listening to podcasts, so I was just so listening in that moment that I didn't even think about speaking. Like, usually the audio is going the other direction with me and podcasts. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm Jess. I'm the other guy.
You don't talk back to podcasts because I do.
I sometimes shout angrily at them.
Like, I'll be on a walk or on a bus and somebody will say like a question, or they'll miss like what is an obvious fact to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll be like, "Oh, what's that movie with a cylindrical robot and his best friend the gold robot, and there's some guy in a robe," and I'm like, I'll be saying name of the rose, name of the rose, name of the rose, and they never figure it out.
Yeah, see, I never get like that level of feedback of the podcast. Occasionally I'll just like sort of like snort to myself and say, this doesn't sound like my American life. But that other than that, no, really not much back and forth.
Yeah, so we'll get to this later in the meat of the podcast, but today we're going to be talking about the remarkably broad question of how do you play adventure games. But first, here in my notes, it says, this is as you could tell, this is our first podcast because it's the first one you're listening to, unless you're listening to a later one, you decide to roll back. And I said to Jess before the podcast started, I was like, if you're not feeling this one, just wait, like, 3 in. 3 in is
Absolutely.
usually three in is usually it.
And we talked about this, like once we really got on a roll, like by the time we're on episode like 30, 40, we'll probably go back and re-record this one. So, if like you're checking in kind of early, give us a few more months and maybe we'll go back and redo this one, and it'll be like the special edition version.
No, we'll add sound, like fart sound effects and licensed music, because at that point we won't care anymore.
That's right.
And yeah, just a lot of really exciting stuff. Now, before we get to adventure games, what are you playing right now? Are you playing an adventure game, not counting on your stream? We should probably introduce ourselves.
Yes.
If you're unfamiliar, we both stream adventure games on Twitch. Myself is PS_Garrick, and Jess.
I am Decaf Jedi. Decaf like the coffee that's bad, and Jedi like the space wizard monks.
And are you playing? Here's a question, and this is something I was wondering. Do you play, since you started streaming adventure games? Do you play a lot of adventure games? Not on the stream.
This is tough. Like, I feel like these days, I've been streaming now for a few years, as you have, and especially with adventure games, I do end up saving most of them for my streams. Like most of the time when I'm playing
right
with the gang. It's all our pals out there in chat and everything. When I'm playing games, adventure games rather, outside of that, it's usually because I'm trying to like edit together a video or get some footage or some screenshots. Like it's very rare that
you're sucking the marrow out of the bone. Yeah,
the cream of the crop. I'm kind of very rarely actually going in and playing adventure. So most of my off-stream gaming tends to be in completely other genres. Like I don't mind burning through an action game or an RPG or something like that when I'm not on stream. But I usually save the adventures for streams.
So what are you playing now then?
You want to hear the
Yeah.
bananas answer
Yeah.
this?
What are you playing?
Are you
now?
ready? Are
Yeah,
you ready?
I'm ready for the answer.
You're ready for the answer. I'm playing, of all things, I've been hooked on this lately. Fortnite, and not what you think, not Battle Royale. I am playing the original PvE Fortnite Save the World thing, the game that launched before it turned into a big Battle Royale thing. So
I don't know very much about Fortnite, so I didn't even know there was another Fortnite within
there's
Fortnite.
this massive sprawling like player versus environment campaign that the game launched with that has like full voice acting, storyline, like 900 different kinds of currencies to collect and spend. It's got it all.
The Wii Smash Brothers that has like that huge, like the Subspace Emissary. If you played that,
Yes, it's strange, but I've been going back and playing that, and it's one of those games. I mean, after you've played about an hour, it's exactly the same forever, but the numbers do go up. So it's one of those games where it's like the more I play, what it used to be my power ranking of like 13,204 just went up to 13,607. And now I'm like some degree powerful. Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, it's one of those games. There's not a lot there, but the numbers do go up.
That's good. I spent most of today. I bought at the Steam sale Persona 5 because I know a lot of people like Persona 5. And I never finish long JRPGs, so this probably will not be the exception. Maybe it will be. Maybe this will be the one. Maybe I will this is the one I will complete as opposed to play for about 50 hours, which is to say like the first act.
Yes.
And
deeply invested by that point.
Yeah, and then I'll just be like, I'm full. Like I just, I rub my stomach and like the chef is running out after me and he's like, that was just a course of appetizers. You just ate, like you just ate some garlic bread. And I'm like, no, sorry, I'm full. I'm done.
Oh yeah, 50 hours on a JRPG is an amuse bouche.
Yeah, that's
best.
like just a little, yeah. Like so I've been playing it and I haven't played any of the other personas though. I don't think there's any narrative connective tissue like similar to like Final Fantasy, I suppose. I don't know. But I didn't know that it was so high on content warning topics immediately.
Oh, okay. Good.
Which is really like I'm just playing like I'm playing and I'm sharing the screen with a couple of my friends and I'm like, oh yeah, it's like this high school RPG and like the first thing you see is like something traumatic happening and I'm like, oh, sorry. And it's like there's a creep at the high school and it's like no.
Yeah, no. Yeah, this is why I tap out of those games quickly too. Yeah, I mean, I've like I own several Persona games and make
you
it
own
like
several Personae.
Yeah, yes. I have multiple persona disorder, and yeah, I've yet to get anywhere in any of them. I really like the graphic style. I like the idea of those games. I think to myself, would it be fun to sit down and just get immersed in a JRPG? And then I consistently do not do it. Yeah, I don't know. The only JRPG I've ever played is Anachronox, which is not a good start since it's not actually J. It's a faux JRPG.
Yeah, I mean you and I are both. So this is actually a nice seg. A nice seg into
let's seg it up.
Topic. So you and I both primarily PC gamers growing up, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like part of the if you're not someone like it's hard to get into JRPGs late if you didn't grow up like with Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior here, and like just be like, oh yeah, I'll play this for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So like that's just not something that I had because I was playing adventure games on my
Right.
Gateway 2000 computer.
That's the way to do it. Now, I was playing it on a Tandy 1000, which is half as many.
That's
that's half as many. That's half as many. So
that's half the power.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? Just like what was the cow print situation on a Tandy 1000?
Well, it wasn't so much in my case cow print as it was like yellowing from a it was being stored in a family where both parents smoked at the time. So so the machine did have some discoloration, but not as cool as like a cow print box or anything to go with it.
Man, those cow print. I mean, so okay. So the topic today, as stated at the top, is how do you play adventure games? And maybe the first like most literal answer to that is on what? And so my first one I played was King's Quest on King's Quest.
Like a weird the King's Quest.
King's Quest.
Yes.
Played King's Quest on our IBM PC Junior, which the Tandy 1000 was like of the family of, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is a nice way of saying a cheap knockoff of.
Yeah. So that was for me. That was my first. It was on a 16 color IBM PC Junior. I think it had a little joystick.
Oh yeah,
a little joystick that you can move King Graham around.
Is that how you chose to move King Graham around?
Well, I was a child, so I didn't know how to type. This is okay. So the first time I played adventure games, I was a tiny little boy and playing on our PC Junior, and I couldn't read or write, so I just would walk Graham around until he died.
Yeah, that is a huge disadvantage in a game with a text parser. I feel like that is going to really work against you, being unable to read or write.
I like so many people, I definitely helped me learn to read. Like, but yeah, I just pretty much walked Graham around and then walked him into a river, or walked him into a pond, or walked him into a moat, or a wizard would get him, or a witch would get him.
I mean, ogre.
An ogre would get him. What were some of the other things that could get him?
So when a staircase could get him.
Yeah.
So when you were playing this, did you have like a parent or a sibling or anything along those lines around that was actually like for real playing the game, or was it just a walk around? Was it a walking simulator for you and that's it?
I mean, for me, yes, it was a walking simulator. It was the Gone Home of the 80s. My siblings played and beat it, I'm pretty sure. But for me, it was just like I was just very intrigued by it, and I was also intrigued by how it colored in every scene when you walked into each scene, because
that effect is very good.
That's not something like if you play it on ScumVM, unless there's some setting I'm unfamiliar with. On like the PC Junior, it would draw every black line, and you would see every black line be drawn by, in the screen, and then each color would fill in on each of them. And it was, I think if I did that now, if that was on ScumVM and I did turn it on, I would be bored to tears because it did that for every single scene. because it had to. Like that was
Yes.
not that was
It wasn't an artistic choice. It
no.
was this is how we need to render this stuff. Yeah, I loved it. Did the same thing on the Tandy, and at the time it was just like watching a storybook come to life in front of my young eyes.
So that was the first time, and that was how I played it. I just played it until I was dead, which was quickly. How was the first time? Because I'm familiar, and people who know you are familiar with your first game is King's Quest 2 on that Tandy, which you got for Christmas.
That's right.
Deep on
Christmas.
Jess lore.
Yeah, you gotta get that deep Jess. Now, a lot of podcasts won't give you deep personal lore in the first episode.
Yeah.
But I already have so much established lore simply by merit of being very old. I think that's like one way of thinking about growing old is just I am increasingly filling codex after codex with lore. And I'm leaving them scattered around so people can discover them in the world out of order and try to piece together my story. But yeah, King's Quest 2 on the Tandy 1000 EX, 5.25-inch floppy drive. That was my first game, Christmas 1986. I was 9 years old, and I too played it with a joystick. I had the joystick around. I would steer Graham with the joystick, put the joystick down, type the commands as needed, and then pick the joystick back up and continue steering him around. Sometimes I would play co-op. Now, this is what was great about that control scheme.
Oh.
I could hand my friend the joystick. Yes. This is...
Oh, that's so cool.
It was fantastic. Let my friend steer Graham while I ran the keyboard. I mean, because I was an award-winning type. I've talked about that also before. So, clearly I'm keyboard boy while my friend is doing the steering. But yeah, that for me, my parents, I think when they bought my computer, the Radio Shack where they bought it, threw in a few free games, and one was Ghostbusters, the David Crane Ghostbusters game,
right?
That was ported to every system on Earth, and the other was King's Quest 2, and I just immediately fell in love with it. I mean, to me, and I've said this before in other venues, to me as a 9-year-old kid playing that game and just starting out on the beach there, it was like an open world game for me.
It is.
Yeah, I could go anywhere, could go do anything. It was amazing.
And that might have drawn me to it too, even though I couldn't do anything. I just died immediately. Was that we had an NES, so I would play Mario 1, and that has a very specific kind of experience, whereas in this there's like a big world to explore and die in.
That's right.
Okay, so you beat King's Quest 2.
I did beat King's Quest 2.
How do you do that? How did you solve King's Quest 2? I didn't do that. I was unable to.
Go north 2 screens.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Then go east a screen and wait for Little Red Right. No, the way I did it. I mean, this is the answer. If you were hosting a podcast with 9-year-old Jess, first of all, he'd be like, "What's a podcast?" I feel like.
It's kind of like a radio show. It's called a podcast because it used to be on iPods.
Yeah, you see, like 9-year-old me wouldn't even know what an iPod is. I'd be close.
And then I'd be like, an iPod?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know a Zune?
I did actually. I had a Zune when I was 9.
Oh yeah.
I would have gotten it.
Out of a time hole.
That was the coolest. There's no way to sync it or put music on it, but it was very cool to just carry around. No, how did I mean, if you'd ask me when I was 9 years old, how do you play adventure games? The answer is absolute brute force. Just, I was able to dedicate hours a day if necessary to typing every word I could think of into every screen I could travel to until my number of points increased by 1 or more. That's how I played adventure, because I beat so many of these Sierra games inexplicably, games I can't even remember how to beat today after having played them 5 or 6 times. And it just had to be simply, as a child, I could pour.
And these are text parser games
right.
if for anyone that's bafflingly listening to this podcast and unfamiliar with those games, has a text parser at the bottom. You move a little guy around, but you have to type in everything.
Yeah. So eventually, both the parser and I have a limited number of words we know. And you just have to assume I know more than it does. And eventually I will exhaust it through sheer relentless gameplay.
It is that. So, and like, did your friend being there, did that help? Like, did
that helped immensely?
He be like, I don't know any of the puzzles in King's Quest.
Yeah, no, he was like my corner man. He would towel me off. I'd spit in a bucket. The whole thing. Yeah, cut me if I needed it. But no, that helped immensely. Like to be able to bounce things off of my friends and play collaboratively like that. I mean, it's actually what I love about streaming games today. Is I grew up playing most of these games with one or two friends in the room. So having chat there who is kind of experiencing them with me, it feels like how I played these games when I first discovered them. I think it's a lot of the appeal of trying to stream adventure games to me. But yeah, definitely having a partner helped a lot. Because it wasn't like, I'm not a puzzle guy. I'm not good at adventure. It's not like I was a prodigy at 9 years old. I promise you.
Well, it's really funny. It's funny for me to think about this because it's like even once I became literate and could like do all this, I still never. I never solved those games as a kid. I never did. Like even once I started to buy the literal point and click ones, I never solved. I'm a fake gamer.
I knew it. I knew it.
I beat I got for I think my 9th birthday actually a collection of LucasArts games that contained Loom, Maniac Mansion, Zak McKracken, and Monkey Island, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Wow!
Of those, I completed Zak, which is a game you can brute force.
Mm-hmm.
That is a brute forceable game. If you're an adult, that's exhausting. But as a child, I could just sit there and wander through a maze without mapping it for hours because I am a child. So I will just do this. I will just click on every door until I end up in a different place because I know eventually I will.
Yeah. I think this is an important part to pause and say we were both incredibly popular children. I mean, I don't want you to get this twisted. Sure, it sounds like we've just holed up in our rooms, trying to beat Zak McKracken and stuff, but we were, the life of the party. Absolutely.
Yeah. What was great as a child, and all of the sad people listening to this are going to sadly nod. It's being into adventure games when literally no one else on the planet was.
Absolutely. Yes.
Like no one else at school, and you just go and you're like, hey, have you heard of this Monkey Island game? And like, no, I play Mario like a normal child.
Yeah, I play Contra, you idiot. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Just going up to other children and being like, this is, we're getting into the trauma.
I don't know. Are you playing Sonic the Hedgehog? Because that's a game people like.
I'm playing Quest for Glory. I'm playing as a thief.
There are multiple
what
paths.
are you talking about? I'm like, I like, what do you play games on? We have a Nintendo. Oh, I play them on my PC. What? My dad has one of those. We don't play, like, he does stuff for work on it. Like, what are you talking about? Oh.
See, this is funny. I mean, our listeners may or may not know this, but I teach classes about video games at a university. And when I try to occasionally, like when I'm introducing myself, I talk about sort of my journey as a gamer. And my students are still just
you just said my journey as a gamer.
let me share my testimony with you today.
Sorry. My journey as a gamer.
Let me tell you about my journey as a gamer. How I started. No, and to explain adventure games to them, first of all, of course, they've never heard of a game like King's Quest. And to explain what that is, there's nothing that sounds as bizarre and unfun as an adventure game than when you try to explain it to someone who has no idea what it is. Like, I feel like it's a genre that defies.
Perfect for podcasts is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. Yeah, I mean, if there are people who are like searching for like information on like quest bars or something like that and ended up at this podcast,
now we've really half hour in and they're like, when are they going to talk about energy bars?
Yeah, and I'm sure we've sold them on this genre. Yeah. Maybe that could be a segment. Mark that down on our show notes. We sample Quest bars, and maybe we get a sponsorship.
Ooh, I don't think they're. Anyway, so sorry. Your gamer's journey before I was.
Yeah, but my students are just perplexed by it too. Yeah, I mean, I feel just like I did back in the day when I'm like, one of my friends is like, "What'd you do this weekend?" And I say, I tried to film a King's Quest 3 fan movie in my backyard, like a normal, again, like a popular normal kid. Can't stress that enough. That's still how I feel.
One of the things about being a child is you have parents that are like, even if they're strange, they're really themselves. They're kind of concerned about you having like at least one or two normal child hobbies. And so it's like, why don't you play an instrument? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? I'm like, I want to play. I want to play on our PC. I want to find out more about Daventry and Kyrandia, and it is just remarkably funny to me, just the idea of like on the podcast I just wrapped up doing with the Last Best Babylon 5 podcast about the television show Babylon 5. One of the last things like on our last episode, I was given a child's Halloween mask of one of the characters, Londo Mollari, and then we just launched into making fun of like, what little child in 1994 is going door to door, and who are you? I'm Londo Mollari. I'm an ambassador on a space station. Like, that's like, not to just reiterate a joke from another podcast. It's just like, it just makes me think of, it's like, oh, when you're like a little kid and then somehow you get an esoteric hobby. The nice thing about being adult is that almost all, I no longer have I'm not being pushed by my parents to have normal hobbies anymore. And so it's like, I go on a date and it's like, well, what do you do? Well, I stream it on Twitch. Oh, that's cool. Like, what do you play? Nothing you've ever heard of.
Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Madden.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm actually a pretty big name in the Madden community.
Yeah, I'm actually Joe Madden.
John Madden's beloved son.
Joe Madden. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, you see, you aren't selling it. That's going to mess you up.
Then someone's like, you're lying. What do you really play? And it's like, it's embarrassing.
That's when you just run out of the restaurant.
Yeah,
just just leave like a bin-shaped hole in the wall when you just like, sprint through it.
No, fortunately, I go to the same restaurant, so they just leave that hole in the wall, so I don't even have to break it through.
Is it hard, like, positioning yourself though to like, like get your
I
arms
get it's
akimbo?
yeah. I practice, but all right, so now we've talked about our traumatic childhoods.
Yes.
I beat those games though. I beat Zach and Monkey Island and Loom. Loom being the easiest one. I think I beat Loom immediately because it's very
Mhm.
short. Uh, is that came with like a semi walkthrough that was like little nudges. It was like the manual had like all of these narratives of the game written in first person. And it was like, oh man, what a day I've had. Oh, I had to deal with this. Good thing I thought about, stepping on this loose plank a couple times so I could pick up a fish. Like it was written in that way, like
Uh-huh.
little nudges and things. And so those are the ones as a child, I was hopelessly reliant on walkthroughs, and I still am. But I guess, yeah, like now, let's talk about how do you play an adventure game now as a grown up with
Okay,
a
this is
grown
a
up?
wonderful question.
Yeah,
You want to hear my grown-up perspective?
I want. Yeah, it's now time for After Dark. I have to
Okay.
build out, like, since this is the first one, I have to
Mhm.
build out like to the soundboard what clips and sound clips. I just threw a couple that I just have on my hard drive onto the soundboard.
Ye
We'll get there once again by, like, episode 3. Come
Yeah,
back.
I mean,
Don't fear.
listeners, I'm looking at Ben's soundboard right now, and literally it's just all wolf howls. It's very strange. Like, it's just like 8 different buttons are all wolves. It just I mean, I get it. Wolves are cool, but I mean, that's number 4. That's Wolf Scream 4. Now, Ben, that doesn't even sound like a wolf. What breed is that?
That's obviously for there's many adventure fans listening to this sagely chuckling to themselves as they identify that that's Graham's scream in King's Quest 5, and they're
It's a good
like, ho,
scream.
ho, ho, ho. Oh, this might be the type of podcast for me, with a reference to Graham's scream.
Let me see if they have a Patreon. Yeah, that's what they're thinking right now.
Ho, 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 ho,
how,
ho.
how do I play adventure games as an adult? For me, like you'd think I've done this a lot, and I've played hundreds of hours in this specific genre, and I've written about this genre and run websites about it, and I stream it every week. I am still very bad at adventure games, and I'll be completely honest with you. The way I play adventure games as an adult is usually embarrassingly with a walkthrough close at hand. I am 100% a walkthrough boy nowadays. I cannot solve puzzles to save my life. When I occasionally do, it really is this moment of triumph and pride. But yeah, I am a lazy adventure gamer as an adult. How about you, Ben? How do you play
This
adventure games
is
as an adult?
and this is why I felt, this is why we had to have this be the first one. So anyone that's like listening to this and they're, trying to triangulate, if they agree with our opinions or not.
Mm-hmm,
this is
mm-hmm.
this is a real easy way to triangulate, because they'll be like, "Oh, they didn't respect the puzzle. They didn't respect Le Serpent Rouge."
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we get rid of that in post?
They didn't respect the Serpent Rouge.
Oh, sacred geometry.
That's
No.
right. They didn't respect it. Because it's funny, like you know, there are a lot of different types of ways that people interface with adventure games and why they play them. And there are people that love intensely puzzly ones, and ones with, like, so Le Serpent Rouge is like that's a very complex, like it's a graph like you have to like
Mhm.
draw a graph on paper. You
Yes.
have to, right? Like I
Yeah,
didn't
from
I
Gabriel Knight 3, we should say, in
yeah.
case anyone's not familiar with it. Yeah, it is yeah, you're like graphing over a map, you're deciphering lots of clues. It is considered by some one of the greatest adventure game puzzles of all time.
It
And I
has its
respect
own
that.
Wikipedia page.
It has its own Wikipedia page, and the amount of design and thought that went into it is unquestionably impressive. But for me, trying to figure that out for the first time a couple of years ago when I played Gabriel Knight 3 for the first time, I felt like my soul was going to leave my body and that would just never come back. That would be the end. Cause of death, the Serpent Rouge.
Well, Jess, I don't wanna, fight, but like I'm just reading the reception on this the
Mhm.
Wikipedia page for this has a whole 2 paragraphs on reception. The
Wow.
Serpent Rouge puzzle has received generally positive reception
That's the
and
best you can get.
identified as both a quote renowned end quote and a quote revered end quote puzzle by Incubator Games CEO I'm not Radek Konswick, sorry if I
Hmm.
mispronounced his name, and writer Jack Allen, respectively. So
Well, they're wrong.
are
I'm
you
sorry. I mean, you heard it here first.
you're the Incubator Games CEO
Yeah, I mean,
and writer Jack Allen?
yes, both of them. I mean, I'll challenge them to a celebrity boxing match over this right here.
Incubator Games, they published the CO2 connection.
Oh yeah, just
Yeah.
really, huh?
And Blockstar Party. It's a Facebook
Oh,
game.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean that's, I
And don't
mean,
forget about the iOS game Feeding Time. And
I mean,
that's
take it back.
Incubator
I
Games.
take it. Okay, you know what, Ben? You've changed my mind.
That's right.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, with a yeah, no, but yeah, I mean, that is a great example of the kind of puzzle that for someone who loves puzzles, like I know there are folks in the chat. Hey, there are a lot of folks in my chat when I was playing that who are just like, "Why can't you figure this out, you absolute dummy?"
Yeah.
And they were right. But also, I think there are people who just outright love that stuff. I play adventure games for, I think, largely story and character.
Mhm.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for just a story I can vibe with more so than the. I mean, I don't mind the intellectual challenge of a puzzle for about the first, I would say, 45 seconds or so of it.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Like you're like, oh, puzzle. I will try to solve this today.
I'll simply use logic and reason.
I'll, I'll put 2 and 2 together this time for sure.
That's
And
right.
then so here, yeah, I'll answer. Yeah, it's the same. I enter every time I start like a new game of something. I try to give an honest attempt
Hmm.
at solving a puzzle, and then like I I think that if I put my like uh because for some of them it's best solved by you do it, you kind of think about it, maybe you put the game down, and then like the next day you wake up and go like, oh, I'll try this. But I know that if I do that, I'm putting the game down.
Yes.
So I'm like, all right, I'm going to attempt to solve this in my head within about a couple like a minute. And if I don't, I will I'll look over, or like I do like a nudge. I should seek out more nudges. Um
You know, that I think I'll ask then of you the question I'm sure all of our listeners are asking themselves right now. If we are both walkthrough boys that
Yeah.
are bad at puzzles, um, does that make us bad adventure gamers? And if so, what
No.
business do we have hosting an adventure game podcast?
Well, I, well, first off, I mean, I had to do something with my time.
That's true.
So that answers the podcast question. But well, I mean, and you started to say this. I love adventure games, and I love I love big weird worlds, and I especially love what people have been doing with adventure games lately.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of them are, I think, even though it's they're the people that feel that way about puzzles are very loud. I think majority of people are in our there's a Nixonian silent majority
Mm-hmm.
of adventure game players that are exactly as lazy as we are. And like I think that like a lot of modern games are kind of developed with that in mind. And if you play like a game, a King's Quest made in 1985 or
Mm-hmm.
uh if you play one of those, like you get this big wide world and a big text, like a text parser you can type anything into, and all of this, there's all sorts of possibility. And a lot of, not all, but a lot of recent adventure games are about like kind of limiting those, and limiting the amount of like inputs that you have, so it's like it doesn't take 10 hours to rub every single inventory that you have on every single other inventory item. Like it, you know, the the puzzle space makes a little more sense. And there are good and bad things about that, but it's like, have you played something like have you played Case of the Golden Idol?
No.
So Case of the Golden Idol isn't an adventure game, it is a puzzle game, and I love it, and I
Oh,
love the
okay.
puzzles of it. And I like being perplexed, and I haven't used a walkthrough on it. Like I think there are like little hint tokens on it. It's been a minute since I played it, but it's a game where you get these very specific type of narrative puzzles, and you have a very limited tool, like set of tools, and that is very interesting to me. Whereas like an adventure game, part of it is it's like, well, it's the puzzles, but it's also characters, and it's also art, and it's also like a narrative, and it's also like, even if it doesn't have like stats role playing, it's role playing in that you are playing a character, you're
Mm-hmm.
inhabiting a character in a lot of them. And like, so that's why like it's good for us to start out with this discussion, because it's like all of those things are really appealing to me. Like embodying like a character, um
Yes.
and stuff like that. And that's like, or or in a game where I'm not like a character necessarily, like if I'm playing like Mist or something, like,
Mm-hmm.
which is very very puzzly, but it's like it's a cool space to explore, it's a cool place to be. um and so that is a lot of why, like, what I look for in a game. And puzzles are very secondary, but some like I but oddly enough, I appreciate a good puzzle even if I don't solve it.
That's absolutely. Yeah, no, same way. You know, I can see the work that goes into it. I mean, and sometimes I have that like kicking myself, oh, how in the world did I not see this solution? But when you come across a good puzzle, there's something to be said for it. But yeah, for me, the puzzles are at some level kind of just part of what makes it a game to some degree more so than what I'm there for. Yeah, I mean, I want to you know, I think I once read a description of adventure games suggesting that like the reward structure that's built into them is seeing a new screen you haven't seen
Yes, I've
before.
read the same thing, and I also don't know what that's from.
Yeah, that's horrible that we both, yeah. Or,
I remember reading that, being like, they're right. Whoever it is that said this is correct.
Yeah, hearing a new piece of dialogue that you couldn't get before, hearing a little bit of music that plays because you entered a new scene. And that's what has always jazzed me. I think, yeah, when you talked about this idea of like being able to embody a character, I think in the adventure genre, especially when you go back to the 80s, when you think like 1984, when King's Quest came out, it's like, yeah, it was really hard for me to embody Pac-Man or like the kangaroo from Kangaroo.
What about Mr. Do?
Now I could inhabit Mr. Do, absolutely, because I do run around inflating. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, wait, I'm thinking Dig Dug. I was Dig Dugging. You were Mr. Doing.
Yeah, I
Dig Dugged and you dude.
Yeah, you're always walking around with your pump and blowing up monsters, and I'm always throwing my little magic ball around.
Yes, sorry, my mistake. But yeah, that for me, compared to the sorts of games I was playing, because I think I went straight from Atari 2600 to playing adventure games on the PC, and that ability to really embody and identify with a character. And yeah, you even see it in magazines from the era where oftentimes they would use, the word role-playing game almost synonymously with adventure game, because yeah, you are ultimately playing some kind of role, even if it's not stats based and D&D inspired sort of RPG gameplay. Yeah, the notion that you're inhabiting a role, I think is what's more important to me. And then, I want the puzzles to support and uplift that and make sense in the context of the story and the character and the writing and everything else, more so than seeing those as the focus of what I'm playing for.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we asked people to this same question, and I'm going to read some of those responses. And if you have anything that you would like to say to us, you can send us an email at questquestpodcast@gmail.com. That's questquestpodcast. Quest was taken. Quest was taken. So this is like I'm just adding things until I'm like, all right, well, so it's Quest. That's right.
It's Quest Podcast 4266 _C at gmail.com.
But we did ask some folks. Here's some of the answers. One of them is from Night Warbler. I like to explore the whole area, not even trying to solve a puzzle at first, just feeling out the world and how much I can do in it. Once I know where the locked doors, the security checkpoints, the impassable gorges are, that's when I start thinking about how to explore past those.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, would you say that's how you play these sorts of games? Are you an explore first, solve later?
Explore first, unless like a solve is very obvious. But I like to, because the thing is that you're probably not going to, like, you might not necessarily, like, if you see a puzzle, you might not necessarily have all of the required things. Mm-hmm. So it's worth going into every possible room that is available and identifying. Like, that's something that Return to Monkey Island did, and some other adventure games are doing, where it gives you like the checklist.
Yes, which I love.
And that's really helpful.
As you were saying that too, I was just thinking of your recent playthrough of Toonstruck, which I think was a fascinating game in that, it was sort of every room presented one puzzle. And at least in your playthrough, it really was like, well, I'm going to explore every room, basically figure out the 10 or 12 puzzles it has for me to solve, then set about doing each of them along the way, which, yeah, that felt like very much that kind of exploration based model. I think it's hard for me to tease apart. I will say, I think that you probably on your Twitch channel at least play quite a few more contemporary adventure games than I do. And a lot of the ones I'm playing, I'm revisiting, which lends me to really going with like a very linear, how do I knock this out efficiently because I know how to get to the end of Space Quest 2. So the exploration kind of drops away. And it's something I do like about when I pick up a newer adventure game is being able to go back to that. Like, I just want to wander around and figure out what's going on here and see how these pieces start to fall into place as I go.
So another response here from Bogus Meat Factory. He's also a streamer of the same name. My approach typically changes based on the style of adventure game. First, I recognize how the game is designed. Are clues to puzzles in dialogue through experimentation, depth. From there, I get my bearings and start to map out and explore the areas around me to help identify where the puzzles are. That way, I'm able to see the path the game wants me to take and to see how the puzzles relate to the rest of the world. Adventure games vary so much in design, making it tough to nail down a single universal approach. So the most important thing to do is to keep an open mind and try to listen to the game's feedback on how it expects you to play. That's interesting. So when you were 9 and you're playing King's Quest,
King's Quest?
Yeah, I don't know why. Like I'm like Matt burying saying King's Quest. I don't know why that is. But I am. It's unconscious. It's unconscious. Like I'm not trying to do a bit here. It's very funny. King's Quest. But like I remember like having the paper out and drawing like the square and then like the little lines and writing like the name of each room. Like, did you do that?
I did in a limited fashion. Again, oftentimes that would be something like, again, the advantage of having a friend or two in the room. Like I would occasionally have someone mapping while I'm doing. It's like I kind of delegated those tasks occasionally, but I would do simple maps, mostly because the instruction manual told me to, and I'm a rule follower. You know this about me, Ben.
That's
you
true.
know, above all else, I follow rules. And in the manual for King's Quest 2, it says draw a map, and then it gives a little example of what such a map would look like. Yeah. And then I did exactly what it told me to do. So yeah, I think something that's interesting in Bogus's response there is that, sometimes I think the difference between a well-designed adventure game and a poorly designed adventure game is whether that feedback element exists. Like I think games that signal, you said maybe you find it in the world, maybe you find it in the dialogue, but it's pointing you toward what the puzzles are, where to find them, how to solve them, etc. I feel like it's bad adventure games that fail to do that. Like I'm thinking about the capstone adventure games, right? Like when we get into the world of Beverly Hillbillies and Wayne's World and like bottom of the barrel type and point and click adventure games. Oh, those are great games. I'll just go ahead and promise now. There'll eventually be an episode on capstone games.
I have to play them.
Yes, you do have to play them. Absolutely. But so I think of those games, and I mean, what makes them so bad is that in no way do they signal what is a puzzle or give you any sense of where a solution might lie. And then you throw in enough moon logic and other things like that. And yeah, you end up with a game that isn't speaking to you in a way that presents solutions, which I think that's when the genre begins to break down.
Yeah. And I mean, to Bogus's point, like it really kind of depends on what the game is, on how it provides the clues. Like, is it providing clues through deaths? Do you think, did Sierra Games, would you say they were providing clues through deaths, or were they just being jerks?
I think it depends on the games. Some of them, will give you like the little hint on what you could have done differently. Like I'm wanting to think Quest for Glory occasionally did a good job of saying, you should have done that a little faster. Maybe if there's just a way to interrupt this ritual before it got complete. Or Lara Bow 2 did a little bit of that too. Like, especially like in the awful chase scene at the end, doesn't have some hints along the way. It's been a while since I played that one, but I think that death can be a good teacher. But I don't think it's not my go-to. I mean, I'm sure this is something we'll talk about in future episodes at some point, but I am a fan of deaths and adventure games. Ron Gilbert, come at me, bro. But yeah, that to me, if done well, it can be a source of entertainment and possibly something that points you in the right direction.
Uh, so Quill says, I think I'm the opposite. I try to take as much as I can out of what's in front of me, then start expanding out. I kind of toy with what's in front of me, then try to reason, then try more and more outlandish stuff. So this is another thing that's interesting to me is that pretty much you know, it's like a it's like a Reese's peanut butter cup, you know, unless you're a foreign listener and are unfamiliar with those commercials which said that there is no wrong way to eat a Reese's. Uh, but
yes, I agree.
Am I like am I the only one that remembers this? I'm just looking around.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I wasn't sure where you're going at first, but now I'm on target. And what you're doing is this brand integration. I get it, Ben. You're trying to mention as many brands as possible, and
trying to name all of our friends, Reese's, and Nestle.
And Ben, I was wondering, where do you get your steaks?
Where do I?
Have you tried Omaha Steaks? I mean, shipped straight to your home, dry aged, and just, I mean, you can't beat them.
The worst thing about this is I did have steak for dinner and I purchased it at Whole Foods.
I had it too. Yeah. It's like,
did we both have steak for dinner?
What do you got to eat before you record a podcast? You need protein, you know, and you
exhausting.
I
know. Custard said, is reluctantly an acceptable answer. I grew up always playing them with my brother and sister, so playing them solo as an adult feels bad, man. I get that.
Yeah. I mean, nostalgia cuts both ways, right? Like, you know, I think for me, it transports me back to childhood in a good way to play an old adventure game, and even a new one when I feel, you know, the elements of the genre shining through. But yeah, I can get the opposite as well.
I think for me, when I was a kid, I was always playing them alone, and I was looking in the manual, and all the manual said it's better to play with a friend, and I could never convince anyone. Like everyone was just like boring.
You know, I do look back, and I wonder sometimes, was I forcing my friends to play adventure games? Now, this is like this is the dark recesses of the mind of a man with social anxiety who is thinking like 40 years down the road, were my friends just being nice to me? Did they really like me?
Well, we'll plumb these, you know, if you have their numbers, we can have them as guests. Finally get that answer. Perhaps you know, unlike in King's Quest 2, this is a layered door you do not want to open. But
what if like one of my friends has a podcast? It's like games my friend made me play.
Yeah. Yeah, you have another, like, you have a friend that's in therapy for having to play these boring games. You're talking to your therapist about like, oh, did he like it? Was I just humoring him? And then meanwhile, the same therapist is hearing from the your friend like, oh, he made me play these horrible games. What a terrible. I'm sympathetic for the therapist at this point.
Have you ever seen a Police Quest? He made me play a Police Quest.
The therapist is like, no.
No.
I'm a normal person.
Yeah.
Is that like a Mario? Like, is it one of the Mario types? Like, does he have a gun? Like, is it like a police Mario?
Like a Mario with a gun and a hat, but a different hat?
Is it like Shadow? Oh, sorry, I'm a big Sonic guy. Therapist.
Can this be a recurring character, the therapist who's a big Sonic
Oh
guy?
yeah, no,
Yeah,
therapy is really going to come up
yeah.
here.
Because it does say here on my checklist for the episode, it says create 4 recurring characters in the first episode, which honestly, Ben, you drew up these show notes, and that seems like a lot.
That is a lot, but it will pay dividends.
Yeah.
And
Well, the merch
dividends.
alone. Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, next. Dr. Mario DSW said, new adventure games. I like to explore and take my time, click through everything. Explore. Everyone is so much better, more thoughtful about this than I am.
Yes.
Click through everything, explore all the dialogue trees, etc. Old ones, I use a walkthrough 80% of the time. The possibility of a soft lock, even especially in Sierra titles, is high. LucasArts titles are a bit better, and I'm willing to explore more in them. That I mean, like like in Codename Iceman, one of my favorite adventure games. If you forget to ask a guy to hand you your driver's license back, you'll ride an airplane halfway across the country and then like need it in a complete and you'll be soft locked because you lost your driver's license. And when you ask for it back, if I recall correctly, the text is like, "Oh, it's always good to ask."
It's true. I mean,
it's I
yeah.
feel like Jim has Jim Walls, who designed that game, like something happened once.
I feel like that is honestly the genesis of every game he worked on, whether it was Codename Iceman or Police
Blade
Quest
Runner.
or Legend of the Black Cat or whatever that pirate game he did was, all of them were just, something happened to him once. He was on that flat that time and had to stop a terrorist bombing. And then he sat down at his computer and just programmed it right in.
And to be clear, that is in Police Quest 2.
How many, Ben? I don't want to sound impatient. How many of these do we have to do until we can just talk about Jim Walls for an episode?
Oh, we have to do a Baker's 20.
A Baker's 20. Okay.
No, we can get to it sooner. We can get to it sooner. we can get to the Jim Walls oeuvre.
The Jim Walls of it all.
Yeah, the Jim Walls of it all. Soon. Next. This is from Michael, our friend Michael. I guess for me, I try to explore everything first because I'm not really patient enough. Me too. To pour over everything and want to see as much as I can. If I solve puzzles, neat. But once I've explored it all, then I make an effort to solve puzzles. Depends on the game. I'm also okay using a walkthrough after being stuck for like 15, 20 minutes. That's right.
Yeah, that's the correct answer so far. That's the most correct. I don't want to make this about winners and losers, but Michael is in the lead.
Winner.
Yeah,
if it's a game that has sort of that I love or feel the puzzle design is very solid and reasonable, then I'll spend more time before using a walkthrough. Yeah. If it's a game that sort of lost my trust in it, in its puzzle design or as soft locks, then I'm more likely to use a walkthrough early on. Kind of kills my enjoyment of the game. Yeah, I would agree with most of this.
Do you feel like using a walkthrough spoils your enjoyment? Like, has there ever been a game that at the end you just like really regretted using the walkthrough on? Or are you unrepentant?
I think I feel bad if it's a puzzle that I felt like the tickle of the solution in my head. If I succumb and I look at the walkthrough and it's like, do this, and I'm like, I was so close to that. Like it was like the pieces, and then I'm frustrated with myself. And so that but like if it's something where I look at it and be like, I would not have put these things together, then I don't feel bad. And that's not necessarily saying that it's bad that I wouldn't have put it together. It's generally because I'm impatient and I don't do the things like that you're supposed to do, which is look at every single thing in the room then examine every inventory item, and then complete every single dialogue, do all of that, and then cross-reference all of the facts, and then see what fits with what.
You're a busy man.
I'm a busy man. I'm a stock trader.
Yeah, a lot of
Buy
people don't
and
know
sell.
that.
Yeah, I'm playing Perfect Tides, and I'm standing on Wall Street.
Yeah, a lot
I
of you
don't
can't.
have time to solve this.
Yeah, we don't have a video component here, but I'm looking at Ben right now, and he's holding one of those little pieces of paper in his hand and kind of just like shaking it up in the air.
Oh, I don't know. I'm also on the floor right now.
Yeah, he just doesn't have time. He's simply
in, like, suspenders and like I look like Michael Douglas in the 80s. And that's me. I'm a real bonfire of the vanities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I said before we started filming and recording today. You're a total bonfire of the vanities.
Yeah. And finally, our last one here is from our friend Paul. And by last one, I mean there was one under it. I'm the kind of weirdo that will probably try to get every single response in a given room if it's that kind of game. But if I get stuck, I become the try every single inventory item on itself, then on every NPC, then on every notable object. The puzzles are well designed. You should never resort to that, but sometimes moon logic forces your hand. This is mostly because I would rather spend an hour stuck than bring up a walkthrough. Wow.
He's made of sterner stuff than me.
Yeah, well, I know that Paul's not on the. I've never seen him on Wall Street, buying and selling.
You know everybody there. You know everybody on the floor, as you always call it.
Yeah, on the floor. If I absolutely need a hint, then chances are I'm gonna end up justifying another hint and another and another. So I try my hardest not to look at all. But sometimes, when you've seen every available room 20 times, enough is enough. So yeah, Paul's a stronger man than either of us.
Are you a completionist? Like
no,
when Paul mentions like I want to hear every line of dialogue, I want to no,
I'm not a completionist on any game in any way. No, absolutely not. Nope.
I think there are games where I have edged in that direction. I think that if there's a game I truly love, like I want to milk every little bit of of gaming goodness out of it. This may come as a surprise to you, Ben, but I was a big fan of the Space Quest series growing up.
Oh.
And I liked those enough. I was obsessed enough with Space Quest where I really did want to try to get that. Like, I want to see every single thing I can in this game. I want to experience every death. I want to get every little joke. I want the whole thing. That is, though, not my typical approach. I am typically I want to get to the end of this game relatively directly. Now, can I get lost in a LucasArts dialogue tree? Absolutely. And let myself just go down a Curse of Monkey Island conversation that never ends. But generally speaking, yeah, I'm a let's head toward the finish line on this thing.
I just don't think most people are as good as the writing on those respective games. And then that could itself be its own topic.
Yes.
Next, our actual final one from Wilco Webb. For exploration first games like Mr. Riven, I'll typically do exploration, note taking, try to collect as much information before I increase my scope of movement by solving puzzles. Then I'll usually try to see all the dialogue for games that have it, but I don't try to use items in places that you wouldn't, except for small games that have funny responses, like the Homestar or Dangerous games. Actual retro games, I try to approach on their own. I'm more likely to reach for guidance, but I think it's because a lot of them I'm trying to learn about them or experience them in a different way. Like I've bounced off of Codename Iceman and Leisure Suit Larry a couple times because I know there's bullshit incoming, but I still kind of want to experience them without guidance. What's interesting about these is I feel that we got a very varied bunch of responses here. and also no one plays them like us. We're very soft. Other than I feel like we're probably closest to Michael,
Yes.
who said, I'm okay using a walkthrough after 15 to 20.
Yeah. Ben, we're just built different, which is to say worse.
Yeah. Well, I believe that that does it. Do you have any further things to say on this theme?
You know, I think I think we've learned a lot here today. First of all, let me say that there's been a lot of learning, there's been a lot of listening, there's been a lot of talking, and I feel like that's what the podcast that's what the podcast medium is all about. But you know, I think that what is great about the adventure game genre is I think it does inspire among its fans. I think it may not it's esoteric enough that you know it doesn't attract everyone, but I think those who get sucked into its web get sucked into it in a big way. Like I feel like once you're a little bit hooked on adventure games, you end up very hooked on them. It's hard to find a casual fan necessarily. Or maybe I was running the wrong circles. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I run with a lot of adventure game freaks like myself. But
yeah, I mean, you did run a massive adventure game website for half of the 90s.
That's true. And the good half of the 90s, for the record.
The good half.
Yeah. But no, I mean, maybe let me walk that back. I think that maybe what I want to say is it's a genre that I think opens itself up to being enjoyed in a lot of different ways. And I think that, yeah, hearing some of this feedback from some of our hopefully future listeners out there, it's hard to imagine they gave us feedback before they've listened, but that's how the timeline works here. It's almost like magic. But yeah, Ben, what do you think? What are your final thoughts here? I have no final thoughts. I've just been talking.
Yeah, I just think it's very as I've said a couple times, I think I really wanted to have this discussion first, so people know that they don't need to listen to us. That's very important to me because I think that for like I'll read on like forums posts or like in discords or whatever, like people be like have very very strong puzzle opinions and puzzle solving opinions, and I too have very strong puzzle opinions, and I notice that most of the time I don't agree with other people's puzzle opinions because they solve them and they play the games like I believe that they're meant to be played, but I opt not to play them that way, and I've been doing this my whole life, so you can't stop me.
Yeah, and you have a podcast. Who are they to try?
Yeah, some forum poster. I don't care.
Some upstart. Some Johnny come lately going to tell you, podcast host, how to play adventure games.
This is how I play adventure games. I take King Graham and I walk him into a pond, and then he dies, and that's how I play the game.
Yeah, that is a solution. It's not the solution, but it's a solution.
That's the end of the game as far as I'm concerned. Then just type mashing things into DOS 2.0 is the rest of the fun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if adventure gaming isn't drowning future monarchs, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So this has been Quest, an adventure game podcast. You can send us an email at questpodcast@gmail.com. You could watch us respectively on our Twitch streams. I am PS_Garrick, GARAK, and Jess
I am Decaf Jedi.
And you can catch us there. You can catch us next week when we're discussing something that we haven't determined yet. But
we'll discover it soon.
Yeah, it all ties in. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to our first episode, and we'll hear you next week.